Hi, everybody. It is I, Mr. Aaron, returning once again. Today, we'll be continuing the adventures of Flat Stanley's Worldwide Adventures, The Great Egyptian Grave Robbery. Remember last time when we left off, Stanley had realized that he had been tricked, and he was not actually on an archaeological expedition. He was helping grave robbers. And so he was enacting a plan to try and make sure that the grave robbers got caught and went to jail instead of actually helping them make a bunch of money. So, that is where we'll be picking up today. Go on in, Stanley directed the police officers. I think you'll find this pyramid is loaded with looting looters loaded with loot. And that is exactly what they did find. After a few moments, the officers began to come out of the pyramid with Sir Hawara and his henchmen and the stolen artifacts. Caught red-handed at last, Amici and her father cried. Stanley was especially happy to see Sir Hawara in handcuffs. There would be no more hand-clapping from him for a while. Soon there was a big crowd around Stanley. So smart, so brave, so flat! People marveled when they found out the story. In the middle of the commotion, Amici gave Stanley a hug. I was wrong when I said I was wrong about you, she said. Stanley felt himself blush bright red. He wondered how he hadn't noticed it before. Amici was very pretty. Amici's father came over and took a picture of the two of them with his instant camera. He gave the picture to Stanley. So you'll always remember your visit. Then he shook Stanley's hand. You've captured Egypt's worst looter and saved the priceless giant scrolls of papyrus. Egypt's debt to you is enormous. How can we ever repay you? Say the word. Whatever reward you'd like is yours. Before Stanley could answer, the little celebration was disturbed by a group of tourists. They were laughing and pointing at Stanley's camel. Look at the shape of that animal, Marge, cried one man. Absolutely ridiculous. Stanley knew too well how it felt to be poked fun of because of one's shape. Hey, he called back, patting his camel. We don't get to choose what we look like. Stanley could almost hear his mother's voice. Hay is for horses, not people, she would remind him if she were here now. She was always one for proper language. Or, if she really were here in Egypt, she would probably say, hay is for camels. She was also always one to appreciate her surroundings. Suddenly, Stanley missed his family again, even more than the night before. Could you please just mail me back to America? He asked. Certainly, Amici's father replied. Let's go inside and get you wrapped up now. The words made Stanley remember something. Just one more thing, he said, and then he asked Amici and her father for a favor. Chapter 9. A Package for Arthur. Back at the Lamb Chop residence, George Lamb Chop arrived home from work early. The office is being repainted, he explained to his wife. Just as well. I wasn't getting much done. I keep wondering how Stanley's doing. He picked up the mail in the hall. Say, Harriet, he cried, there's a large package here from Egypt. Do you think... Yes, I know, Mrs. Lamb Chop said. For a moment I was so excited. I thought our dear boy was back. But it's addressed to Arthur, not us. I think Stanley has only sent a souvenir home early. Oh, I imagine you're right, Mr. Lamb Chop said, disappointed. Besides, the package is just lying there quietly. That couldn't be Stanley. Just then Arthur came home from school. Mr. Lamb Chop noticed he looked very glum indeed. How about a game of Monopoly, Mr. Lamb Chop offered, or a walk in the park to watch the sailboats? Arthur shook his head. It wouldn't be the same without Stanley here. Nothing's the same without Stanley here, he sighed. Well, this might cheer you up, Mr. Lamb Chop handed Arthur the package. He and Mrs. Lamb Chop watched as their son opened it. All three of them cried out in shock as a mummy sprang from the package. The mummy began reeling stiff-legged around the living room. Mrs. Lambchop almost fainted. Mr. Lambchop prepared himself to protect whomever might need protecting. Arthur stared with his mouth hanging open. And then he started to laugh. This mummy is a little flat. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop stepped closer to look for themselves. It was true. Even under all the wrappings, it was clear there was something oddly shaped about this mummy. "Start unwrapping at once," called Mr. Lambchop. And so they did. Finally, after unwinding what seemed like miles of linen strips, there stood their own dear boy, Stanley. What a surprise! There was great rejoicing and many hearty congratulations on Stanley's clever trick. Everyone talked at once. "We'll remember that for a long time."
Ho ho! And to think you were right under our noses all afternoon. How did you ever manage to stay so still?
Then Mrs. Lambchop remembered she had dinner cooking. "Come to the table while it's still hot, please." Over meatloaf and mashed potatoes, being careful not to talk with his mouth full, Stanley told about his adventure. As the part about Sir Hawara's plan to leave Stanley in the tomb, Mrs. Lambchop turned quite pale. She held her husband's hand for strength, but otherwise everyone was quite delighted with the story. Many, many times they exclaimed about how clever and how brave Stanley had been. After the apple crisp was finished, seconds all around, Mrs. Lambchop decided the family had had enough excitement for one day. Time for bed. Stanley was very happy to see his old bedroom, with his spaceship lamp and his striped pajamas neatly folded on top of his soft pillow, just as he had left it. "It's good to be back," he told Arthur. Then he remembered the photograph Amisi's father had taken. He pinned it up on his bulletin board. "That's Amisi," Stanley told his brother. "What do you think of her?"
I think...
Arthur looked at the photograph, puzzled. "I think she's a girl." Stanley got into bed and turned out the light. "That's what I think too, Arthur," he said. He smiled in the dark. And that brings us to the end of this story. I guess there wasn't very much left of it today, but that's okay. So I hope you enjoyed, guys. If you did, be sure to tune in next time. And, pardon me, don't forget about our other live programs that we have going on. Toddler Time with Miss Becky, Stories with Sunny, and Creating with Constance. And don't forget that you can access library materials for our digital content services like Overdrive, Hoopla, RB Digital, Cloud Library, and Canopy. And thank you so much, guys. We'll see you next time.